American Airlines has long maintained one of its largest hubs at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. At one point, the airline had a sprawling long-haul operation from the airport, serving cities in not just Europe, but also Asia and South America. Unfortunately, in the late 2010s, American began gradually scaling back its Chicago long-haul network, so much so that by 2024, only one of its 7 long-haul routes from O'Hare was operated year-round. However, American recently made an announcement that shows it hasn't entirely given up on long-haul flying from Chicago. So today, we're going to explore American's more recent history of long-haul flights from O'Hare and also discuss its newest announcement regarding the airport. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and let's get started. We're going to begin our discussion by rewinding back to around 2007 to 2008. This, I guess you could say, was a peak time for American's hub operations at O'Hare. The airline was operating up to 500 flights a day and served 11 long-haul routes across Europe, South America, and Asia. To this day, 11 long-haul routes is the most that American ever served from Chicago at once, but that's to my knowledge. A lot of these routes are hard to imagine American ever resuming them from Chicago again, but here's the full list. In 2008, American Airlines flew from Chicago to London Heathrow, Manchester, Paris Charles de Gaulle, Brussels, Frankfurt, Rome, and the most surprising one, Moscow Domodedovo. In Asia, the carrier had daily service to Delhi, Tokyo Narita, and Shanghai Pudong. And lastly, American even had a single nonstop link from Chicago to South America with service to Buenos Aires, Argentina, which unfortunately ended later that year on September 3, 2008. 3 years later, in 2011, American was still going strong with 11 long-haul routes, all operated year-round. Moscow and Buenos Aires had been cut by this time, but the carrier maintained all of the previous routes I mentioned, even adding another one to Asia with service to Beijing and new seasonal service to Helsinki, Finland. Unfortunately, by 2012, American ended service to Delhi after 7 years of operation, citing the route's poor financial performance and other issues like the global economic climate and high oil prices. As of 2021, American has resumed service to Delhi, now operating daily from New York JFK. But back to Chicago, American's long-haul network from the city was still rather strong in 2013, albeit now constricted to just Europe and East Asia. At this point, another new route was added to Düsseldorf, Germany, which after a little over a year was quietly suspended along with Helsinki. In the years that followed, American's long-haul flying from Chicago remained mostly the same until 2018. It was here when the airline announced that 2 of its routes from Chicago to Asia, namely Beijing and Shanghai, would be terminated thanks to high fuel costs and overall unprofitability. American's remaining Chicago to Asia route, Tokyo Narita, also suffered a frequency decrease from daily service to thrice weekly service before eventually being cut as well due to the pandemic. But as American cut down on Asia flying from Chicago, it compensated by boosting its European network, adding new seasonal flights to Barcelona, Spain, Venice, Italy, and Athens, Greece within the past few years. But seasonal is the key word here because for the last 2 or so years, the bulk of not just long-haul but American's overall international flying from Chicago has only taken place during the summer season. In 2024, American's Chicago long-haul network consisted of London Heathrow, Paris, Athens, Venice, Rome, Barcelona, and Dublin, with only London Heathrow running year-round. Today, American operates a total of 22 international routes from Chicago, of which only 4 operate throughout the year. Compare this to United Airlines, American's direct rival in Chicago, which operates 43 international routes from Chicago, 22 of them year-round. So you can see that in recent history, American has downsized heavily in Chicago while United has done the exact opposite. But why is this the case? Well, for American, it came down to resource constraints like not having enough pilots and aircraft for those pilots to fly. We've all heard of the ongoing pilot shortage. That's not anything new, and all airlines are experiencing that in some way. However, in terms of fleet, American's predicament is different in that it lost a lot of aircraft during the pandemic, especially wide bodies that it could have used for long-haul flying. In March of 2020, American retired its 16 remaining 767-300ERs, 15 Airbus A330-200s, and 9 Airbus A330-300s. On top of that, it retired 31 757-200s, many of which flew long-haul routes from the East Coast. That's over 70 long-haul aircraft gone, and this is something that American still has not fully recovered from. While it does have orders for 30 more 787-9s and 50 A321XLRs, we're living in a time when manufacturers are facing their biggest order backlogs ever. Secondly, new Boeing aircraft continue to suffer from delays related to supply chain issues and other factors, something that many airlines have called them out for. We also have to consider that pre-pandemic, American would base certain aircraft types at certain hubs, which is normal. They still do this, and other large airlines like United and Delta do the same thing as well. For example, before 2020, most of American's Charlotte and Philadelphia long-haul flights were on A330s, with a handful of 767s and 757s flying from Philly. JFK and Miami's were on 757s, 767s, and 777s, Chicago's were on 767s and 787s, and DFW's were mainly on 777s and 787s. Now, if you take away the 757s, 767s, and A330s, you're missing around 70 planes, causing shortages at pretty much every hub. This means American had to scramble to now assign 777s to Charlotte and 787s to Philadelphia, while simultaneously sending more 787s to Chicago and more 787s and 777s to Miami and JFK. I didn't mention the hubs in Phoenix and Los Angeles because neither are huge long-haul hubs, but of course their handful of long-haul flights also strained American's available resources. So that was my long version of explaining that American still struggles with not having enough long-haul planes. That's making them scale back long-haul flying at certain hubs to prioritize the routes that may perform better year-round from other hubs. Now let's circle back to American's hub in Chicago, whose long-haul routes are entirely operated by 787s. Even though new Dreamliner deliveries continue to be slow, American has announced 3 new long-haul routes coming to Chicago this year, one of which will be a resumption. Brand new service to Madrid, Spain begins on March 30th, and Naples, Italy will be added on May 6th. American hasn't specified the frequencies or operation timeline, but given their current setup in Chicago, I expect that these will operate daily for just the summer season, ending sometime in October. The third route is a resumption with daily winter seasonal service to Honolulu, Hawaii, beginning on October 26th, but only lasting until early January. At 4,243 miles, this will be American's longest domestic route and will resume after 4 years. All 3 new routes will be flown on 787-8s, and you might be able to see that these new flights kind of speak to American's current strategy concerning long-haul flying. Travel to Europe is the most popular in the summer, hence why American operates most of its European network during this period. But when European demand begins to slow down for the winter, many of those routes end for the season, freeing up aircraft to fly elsewhere. People want to go somewhere warm, so demand for Hawaii will begin increasing. By this time, the new Chicago to Hawaii service will have begun, giving customers that option in addition to American's multiple flights from Chicago to Mexico and the Caribbean. Now, we've been talking a lot about how American has downsized significantly in Chicago recently. However, it is encouraging to see that its schedule at O'Hare this summer will be 25% busier than last year. American is expected to operate 480 daily departures from Chicago during the summer, which is one of the busiest it's ever had from the airport in recent history. By the end of 2025, the airline will be running 10 long-haul routes from Chicago. And while we did mention the 3 new long-haul routes, there are 6 other new additions that will be coming this summer as well. On June 5th, new year-round service will begin to Bismarck, North Dakota, Boise, Idaho, Colorado Springs, and Spokane, Washington. Then on June 21st, new summer seasonal routes begin to Hyannis, Massachusetts, and Halifax in Canada. So after a rather dull, for lack of a better term, past couple years at the Chicago hub, I'm really glad to see American using its currently available resources to bolster its operation at O'Hare. Hopefully once more Dreamliners and the A321XLRs come in later this year, American will be able to assign more wide-body jets to Chicago to grow many of its seasonal long-haul flights to year-round service. Let me know what you thought of this video and American's growth plans overall. If I made any mistakes or if you'd like to add anything, please don't hesitate to leave a comment below. As always, I appreciate you sticking around until the end, and until I see you in the next video, take care and goodbye.